Hello and welcome to the Eye on the U podcast, Miami Herald's Miami Hurricanes podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Susan Miller-Degnan, our Hurricanes beat writer here at the Herald. Susan, how's it going?
Going great.
Yeah, we are fast approaching the end of the offseason, almost midway through July already. ACC Media Days will be coming up soon, and then practice. We don't have the official start day of practice yet, but it'll be that first week of August. So we're rapidly approaching football season, but we're not really going to talk about football in this episode. There's honestly nothing going on. A couple of recruiting losses, I guess, for Miami over the weekend. I don't think I've picked up a commit since the last time we talked. But the MLB draft was over the weekend, so we figured we talked quite a bit about baseball last week, just some of the coaching changes. Figured it's a good time to do our kind of like off-season baseball check-in. Obviously, the transfer portal will still mean this roster is going to change a lot between now and the fall, but after the draft, which was honestly a like historically successful draft for the Hurricanes,
Yes.
we've got a decent little idea of what this roster is going to look like next year, with some changes, as I said, obviously to come. But let's start with the draft in particular and why it was historic for Miami. 6 guys go in the top 200, all in the first 2 days of the draft, all in the first 7 rounds. And it's weird because the day kind of started off, or the draft kind of started off a little disappointing with Yohandy Morales falling all the way to the top pick of the second round of the Nationals at number 40. We thought he could maybe go as high as like 15. There were some of the mock drafts were saying. But that kicked off a really, really nice couple of days for Miami. Morales goes at 40. Andrew Walters, I think kind of surprisingly goes on the first day of the draft at number 62 to the Guardians. We knew he was going to get drafted pretty high, but 62 was a lot higher than I think a lot of the pre-draft rankings had him. So very good for him. And a guy who obviously like he got drafted last year in a late round and decided to come back and
late round because they wouldn't match his money.
Yeah. And came back and was even better pretty much as a senior. They were raving about him, by the way. I don't know if you watched the draft, but they were raving about him on the broadcast. The analysts about, his numbers when you like kind of look at them are kind of staggering when he gave up like 14 runs in his career and like 25 hits or something. Like it's he does not give up a lot. Obviously, we all know that. Cool to see him get drafted pretty high. And then on day 2 of the draft, CJ Kafis gets also to Cleveland, Alejandro Rosario to Texas, Zach Levinson to St. Louis. Those guys we all thought were going to go on day 2. And then Dominic Pitelli was kind of like the one wild card. We knew he was going to get drafted at some point. Didn't know exactly when. He ends up going on day 2, also number 7. It's only the second time, day 2, 7th round, only the second time in Miami history they've had 6 guys drafted that high. The other time was 2008, where that team was the number 1. They didn't win the College World Series, but they made it there and were the number 1 overall seed going into that tournament. So, I know a frustrating way last season ended, but you have to remember they were the number 6 team in the country going into the tournament. That was a really good team, and really good for Miami to get so many guys drafted.
Really good. I can't say it enough times. It's not an excuse. It is true. I don't care what anybody says. You're a private school. You're like Miami, costs a lot of money. Florida has a great program, and it's a public school, and a lot of kids, it's much easier to go to Florida and afford it. I'm not saying Florida is cheap, but it's a lot less expensive, and they can have a lot more kids come out for the team. In baseball, 11.7, the equivalent of 11.7 scholarships to be split up among all those kids. It's not a lot of money. It's very rare to get a full scholarship, for example, in baseball. And I just think that I do believe that they're at a disadvantage to begin with. It's tough. It's not like the old days with, I don't know, again, social media and all that stuff. It's tough, but they had a great draft.
Yeah.
A very strong team this past season. I wouldn't call it elite. We've seen, we wouldn't we
Yeah,
didn't
they
go.
didn't win the AC. I mean, obviously Wake was the number one team in the country. They
They
beat
were in
them in
the
the semi.
final. I
But
mean,
yeah, they
yeah,
were good. They were really good. They were a top 10 team or whatever in the
they
country.
could have won it, but it wasn't like, oh my God, this team is just so good, so awesome. They've got to win. They've got to. It's very tough. No,
Mhm.
it's not an excuse. It's the truth. And I think Jay, as we know, Gino resigned, and he did resign. Okay, he was not fired,
Yeah.
by the way. And no matter what people think, he was not forced out. And JD Arteaga has been there forever. Also, he has a tough road ahead, actually, because
That's a lot of talent they're losing. When you get six guys drafted, yeah.
exactly. The other side of having a great draft is what's left for the new coach. Okay, and the new coach who's been around, but so we know Laz Gutierrez, the pitching coach. We're waiting. This year, NCAA allows you to have so in addition to the head coach, 3 paid assistants. I think it used to be 2 paid assistants and 1 volunteer, excuse me. And and I think JD has plans. I haven't talked to him yet, but I know he has plans to expand the staff, kind of like the way Mario Cristobal has hired a zillion assistants that aren't on field assistants. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying baseball is going to have, they're not going to have like that, but he's going to expand the staff.
That's, you talk about the challenges of being a private school. That's the equalizer the private schools have. I mean, you look at Vanderbilt,
right.
which is also a private school. Their facilities are insane. I was in Nashville last year and walked around their campus and made sure to go kind of walk around there. I didn't go inside their weight rooms or anything, but just walking around that baseball facility. It's crazy. Like their stadium's super nice. That whole area around there is really nice. And they can do that for a couple of reasons. One is they're a wealthy private school, kind of like Miami. And they've got a lot of alumni who give back to the program, and Miami's the same way. A lot of former MLB players and stuff, and that's the flip side. Like that's part of why it's important for guys to have get drafted. Like it's obvious, but you want guys to get drafted because it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right now is Miami only has, I think, 3 alumni active in the majors right now. Yasmani Grandal, Romy Gonzalez, and Victor Medeiros literally just got called up. So he's now up there as well. Not that all 6 of these guys are necessarily going to be major leaguers or stars in the bigs, but Yohandy Morales, when you take a guy that high, you kind of expect, like the Nationals are clearly expecting him to be like a cornerstone. Even if he's not a star, a guy who's going to be in the majors. And Andrew Walters going in the Guardians are in first place, like relief pitcher. We might see him in the major soon with how good he is. Like relievers tend to come up, if they make the playoffs, maybe helps them out down the stretch. So, so those two, obviously they were the first 2 guys off the board. They're super interesting because, again, the Nationals really need bats and they're in the middle of a rebuild, and Morales is going to help them there. And by Walters, the way, I think we might see soon.
Kelly's a really good shortstop.
Yeah.
Amazing. He was amazing. He was really, really good. So, yeah, I mean, these guys, we just talked about before we started this podcast that 4 out of the top 5 Hurricanes were drafted as far as
offense hitters. Yeah.
Offense, batting average, Yohandy and CJ, Dominic, and Zach Levinson. And the only one left out of that top 5 is Blake Sear, who's back. And he was just a freshman, and the kid hit 305. He had 12 doubles, 17 home runs, 17, the number 2 on the team. And yeah, his slugging percentage is .620. I mean, yeah, that's going to be big for them to have him back. I think it's a kind of a crapshoot on how they're going to be this season, honestly. Yeah.
They also lose. I'm looking at OPS. They also Ian Farrow transferring, who was like another kind of one of their.
Yeah, but Ian Farrow ended up. I think he started out better than he ended up.
Yeah, he did. He wasn't even really in the lineup by the end of the year.
Yeah, he kind of started out better. And they're going to remember JD is not in charge of recruiting. Okay. So, there, Lopes, was the hitting coach. He was a catching coach and he was the recruiting coordinator. And now he's the UCF. So now, now they need to get, they got the pitching coach, but they need to get a hitting coach, and they need to get a recruiting coordinator, and it depends how they mix and match it. Gutierrez, the pitching coach, is also a quote unquote mental skills coach, but they have to get infield coaches.
Well, that's what Gutierrez, like, that's what he did for the Red Sox. Like, he's like very accomplished in that mental skills department.
That's good. It's important. And catchers, they need catcher coach. So JD still has a lot to do. I mean, maybe he knows now, but we don't really know. And they lost, they lost, and I think we talked about this too. Carson Ligon, who was number one for part of the season, and then a lot of the season, and then he just transferred to Mississippi State. So there's probably a backstory there. Sometimes it's personality, or people clash, don't get along, or maybe just there's some reason he left. Okay, because yeah. So, but they do have as far as pitching, I think people want to know about the pitchers. And I mean, they do have Gage Zeal back, who started the season and ended the season, I think, as the number one kid. He started like the first few, maybe 3 Fridays as a starter for UM. And he ended up with an 8-4 record, 4.30 ERA. So he will be back. And the other pitchers, there's Rafe Schlesinger, who is back, a young pitcher, and he did great. I think in the ACC, one of the ACC games, actually, I think it was a regional game. He came in and pitched like 7 really great innings. Ligon started he pitched 2 innings and did not do very well. And then Rave came in and threw 7 from the bullpen, and they lost that game, but he did really, really well. So he's a kid that could definitely be up, possibly for starting, I would think.
Yeah.
And they have other guys back.
Yeah, they've got a couple of guys who logged a bunch of innings, like Alejandro Torres. Some guys, like no one with eye-popping numbers, but threw a lot of innings, started some games. Ronaldo Gallo, another guy.
Ben Chestnut's back. Chris Cinta is back.
Yeah, they're going to need some of those guys to step up, and we'll see what they do in the portal, too.
He's a freshman, had a 3.53 ERA, which is good. Cinta. I mean, we have to see, what happens. I have a feeling they will end up announcing somebody, at least one, I would think, or a couple guys coming in. It usually happens, but they haven't done it yet. But I think they will. That UM will announce guys coming in. I don't think there are any other guys of significance who transferred out. And Brian Walters, I think they have 2 pitchers who had Tommy John. Maybe I know Brian Walters did, and all those guys will be back, but they won't be starters. I don't think. I doubt they'd be starters after Tommy John. So I mean, I think they have the starting catchers back, which is big.
Yep.
Jack Scanlon and
Carlos Perez.
Yeah, Carlos Perez. I mean, they have Jacoby Long. Did you see that game where he jumped like 100 feet high?
Yeah, was that the weight game?
Weight game.
The weight game.
It was the semifinal of the ACC. It was amazing. It was
so he's at least going to defend out there in center.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting. But they're still significant question marks, really. There is.
Yeah.
And Renzo Gonzalez is back. He could play first or outfield, or he's a lefty. I mean, we'll see what happens. Oh, and the two big freshmen that we Cuvée and Jimenez, the shortstop. Cuvée announced this morning. Actually, it's Thursday that he's back. That he's coming to UM.
Yeah. We should talk about that now. The kind of the flip side of the draft. Miami gets 6 guys picked. Also, 4 committed prospects get drafted. 2 in the first 5 rounds. So those guys are, one is Adrian Santana from Doral, who goes 31 to the Rays. He's definitely, those 2 that were picked high have not signed yet, but they're going to sign. Santana will almost certainly go to the Rays. They weren't expecting him necessarily to wind up at Miami, considering how highly touted a prospect he was. The other one, Tayshawn Walton, an outfielder from IMG Academy, goes to Pittsburgh, I think in the 4th round. So those guys will both be gone. Those were the 2, according to Perfect Game, the 2 top ranked. Actually, not the 2 top. Well, 2 of the top 3 ranked recruits in the class.
Well, actually signed their national letter of intent, by the way. So they actually signed their letter of intents to come to Miami, but nobody expected them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Especially Santana. Everyone knew he was going to be at the worst like a 3rd round pick, and those guys almost always sign. So those 2 haven't signed yet, but likely will. In the later rounds, Woo-Yul Shin from Miami-Dade College, South Korean first baseman, gets picked. Seems like he will head to sign a professional contract. It has not happened yet, but late round pick, JUCO guy. But the big one, as you mentioned, that announced today that he is not going to sign was Daniel Cuvée, number 1 third baseman in the country, number 36 overall recruit in the class, according to Perfect Game. He was behind Santana as Miami's number 2 prospect in the class. Local guy, played at St. Thomas Aquinas, from Fort Lauderdale, and he announced, as you said, Thursday morning that he's going to sign. The Pirates picked him. I said Walton went to the Pirates. He actually went to the Phillies. Cuvée went to the Pirates. In the 17th round, Pittsburgh was hoping to use some of the savings I think they had by going under slot in a couple places to maybe get a steal there. Sorry, I think it's the Perfect Game ads coming up on my screen. They were hoping to get him over slot there, but instead he decides to go to Miami. And that's a huge win for the Canes because that guy was, according to MLB.com, a top 250 prospect in this draft.
And a top Perfect Game
and like number 1 third baseman, and they need a third baseman, as we all know, with Yohandy Morales gone.
Yeah, and they said 36th overall, regardless of position, 36th in the country. So in that class, so that's really good. So they've
got a good young core because he's going to be a major factor this year. He'll probably start at third base, maybe first base. I don't know enough about how he is defensively.
And you got Antonio,
and then one other top 100 recruit, Antonio Jimenez, who was not quite as highly ranked a draft prospect, but still a guy who easily could have gone in the first 10 rounds. And at that point, you never know. He doesn't get picked at all from Archbishop McCarthy, shortstop. So Miami gets 2 of their top 100 recruits. They could have a really good young offensive core if Cuvée, seems like the real deal. Jimenez is, a good prospect as well. And I think, Cuvée played at like a academy school this year, but both guys have been like all county guys, obviously for us, some of the best prospects out of South Florida in the last couple of years. Jimenez out of, as I said, McCarthy, and Miami, as you said, needs help. So between those 2 and Blake Sear, got a nice, talented young infield that question marks for sure, but a potential to be good, definitely.
Yeah, and maybe there's a player, Jason Torres, who will be a true sophomore.
Who was very good in a small sample side, but very productive.
36 at bats, played in 18 games. He hit 472. He had 3 home runs, which is really
a 1.399 OPS. Pretty good.
Yeah, the 11 RBI. That's impressive. We'll see. Norberto Lopez is gone. We'll see who they get for the for the recruiting. That's
in the
gonna be
portal. Yeah, and they've got some other
No,
highly,
as a recruiting coach.
Oh, as a recruiting coach, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what's going to happen this year. I don't think anybody can know for sure, and a lot of it depends on the pitching. I mean, it's the way it is every year.
Yep. Yeah, and the portal makes it even more unpredictable every year. So they're gonna be young, they're gonna have some talent. It'll be, I think probably part of the frustration last year is they kind of missed their shot, right? As we talked about, like when you've got that talented of a roster, you'd like to make a run, didn't happen. And now it'll be a little, I don't want to say a rebuilding year because this team probably still should be really good, but a reloading year and it's going to be unpredictable, as you said. So
it could be a rebuilding year.
Yeah.
And also I think JD will I think JD is going to he's going to take advantage of the NIL, the name, image, likeness factor. I think he's going to try to get some money for people.
Yeah. And again, that's when we talk about the challenges of being a private school versus a public school. That's, as we said, the flip side is.
Yeah. I guess
obviously public schools can spend NIL money too, but it's an advantage that Miami is, as we know in football, can have on some of these teams.
I don't know if coaches can actually, I don't
think yeah, no, I know what you mean, but
he's involved. I think he's going to be pro NIL.
Yeah. He'll be meeting with boosters and all that kind of stuff, and
he knows people. He's been around the program a long time, and a lot of former major leaguers or maybe people who own businesses and things like that. So I think that can only help them, and we'll see where it goes from there. But it was a great draft, and they'll start all over again.
Yep. All right. I kind of got nothing else unless you do. There's not a whole lot of football news going on. As we said, they miss out on Davon Mitchell, a 5-star tight end from California who committed to Oklahoma over Miami and then reclassified. Actually not a 5-star anymore after reclassifying, but still one of the top prospects in the country. Miami obviously was hoping to get him. He was at Legends camp, couldn't seal the deal. So as we said last week, some finally like stuff picking up a little bit for Miami, but right now it's quieted down again a little bit. And I don't think it's gonna, I think it's gonna, a lot of it's gonna come down to what they can do in the fall and some of the new official visit rules where there are no limits on official visits, I think is going to further complicate recruiting and last minute flips and all that kind of stuff. So
that's gonna be crazy, right? No limits.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. We don't know how it's gonna play out, but yeah, it makes it a little bit harder. Whereas like you used to be like, oh, you get the last official visit, it's a pretty good tell. Now there still is the last official visit if you come that last weekend, but I think it's gonna help smaller programs more than it will like be a factor for the powerhouses.
Except the school, no limits. What about schools?
Well, they have their own, like, what do you mean?
Well, this for the paying for airfare.
Yeah, well, as long as they're willing to pay for it.
Boy, that really seems to favor the big money. The Alabamas and.
Yeah, but like those guys are getting. But like people are visiting them anyway. Like if Alabama tells you to come visit, like
actually,
you were always gonna use that as one of your 5. I think it helps more the, I don't know, like Nebraska, where it's like it's hard to get to Nebraska. And as a recruit gonna go visit Nebraska over Georgia, if those are like the last choices, maybe not. And now I think it helps them a little bit. So all right. We're about out of time here. So you can follow Susan on Twitter at @SMillerDegnan. You will be at Messi Mania this weekend, is that right?
This is true.
Messi Mania is here. I'll be there on Monday, I believe. And then we'll actually both be there at the game next Friday. Maybe we'll do a Messi cast at some point here.
Messi cast, yes.
You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. Yeah,
we all know there's that huge press box at
yeah, exactly. It'll be I'm fascinated to see what that scene is gonna look like.
You might not be once we're there.
I'm not. I'll be interested to see how Drive Pink Stadium is ready to handle all that. So anyway, thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.